My name is Jeremy Wade. For 30 years, I've traveled the world in search of legendary river monsters.
I think that he would have drowned me.
It's the most brutal thing you'll ever witness.
This fish can take a small person in one mouthful.
I've uncovered creatures that people didn't believe were out there.
They do exist, they do exist.
But all the time, there's been something lurking in my own backyard. Unmentioned, ignored, but whose legend looms larger than any other. The mother of all freshwater monster myths, Loch Ness. I had drawn a line at this challenge, but I've learned over the years that there's no smoke without fire. And now, I can't ignore the legend any longer. But can I get any closer to the creature at its heart? On an epic journey that turns into a personal obsession, I'll travel from the depths of Loch Ness to frozen wastelands and beyond, in my quest to reveal what's behind the legend of Loch Ness. The legend of the Loch Ness Monster is known all around the world. And whether you believe there is a creature in there or not, no one can doubt the story's grip on the imagination. Often in my investigations, I only have one vague report to go on, but at Loch Ness, there may have been more than 1,000 sightings. This mystery is swamped with alleged evidence that I have to wade through. Many of the reports have conflicting descriptions, so it's virtually impossible to pick out the shreds of truth. And we now know that some of the most iconic monster photos are fakes. Separating the fact from the fantasy that surrounds this legendary river monster is going to be a monumental challenge. This loch is more than deep enough to hide a monstrous secret. But what is it? The loch cuts through the heart of the Scottish Highlands. But before heading there, I start my investigation in Scotland's oldest museum, the Hunterian in Glasgow. I'm here to examine a very special exhibit. This is the fossilized skeleton of a prehistoric aquatic reptile called a plesiosaur. For many people, this is what they've come to believe the Loch Ness Monster is. But it's hard for me to fully embrace that idea. And not because this creature's prehistoric. Many of the monsters I've caught in my investigations swam in rivers and seas at the same time as the plesiosaur.
This is a true dinosaur of the deep.
And not because of space. The loch is big enough and deep enough to hide a creature this large. For me, the major issue with this theory is the fact that the plesiosaur is a reptile. Now, all reptiles, even those that live in water, are air breathers. This animal would have to come to the surface several times every day to breathe, and surfacing makes you visible. Now, I find it very hard to believe that a lake as highly scrutinized as Loch Ness could hide an air breather for so long. So if this monster isn't hiding in the vast Scottish loch, what is? Loch Ness is the largest freshwater lake in Great Britain. More than 700 feet deep and 22 miles long. It fills a channel carved by glaciers along a fault line created when a landmass carrying Scotland crashed into Scandinavia 400 million years ago. Ancient, dark, and very cold, what secrets hide in its lightless waters?
Most of the mysteries that I investigate are fairly obscure, known only to a few local people, but this case is very different. Loch Ness is a place that is known about worldwide. But does that mean that looking under the surface here is too much to take on?
I have to believe it isn't. People have always said there's something sinister in the water here. But it took until the early 20th century for the monster to finally surface.
Before the 1930s, this road that I'm driving on didn't exist, so there wasn't really access for people to get to the side of the loch here. But as soon as the road was in place, well, that was when the famous sightings happened, and that's when the Loch Ness Monster acquired its international fame.
The most famous sighting happened in 1933, when a local couple, Mr. and Mrs. Mackay, were driving along the newly improved Inverness Road. Suddenly, Mrs. Mackay caught sight of a giant creature in the water with a whale-like back. By the time her husband had stopped the car, it had gone. The local paper published a report using the word monster in connection with the loch for the very first time, and a legend was born. Around 1 million people a year visit this part of Scotland, many hoping to get a glimpse of the monster. Some search for a lifetime in vain. But Val Moffat had only been living on the loch for a year when, just like the Mackays, she spotted something from the road.
I was driving up the hill. I'd come back from Inverness. I looked across the bay. I saw this dark lump in the water. Sort of slate grey colours, shiny from the water that was all over it. It looked like a boat that had turned upside down. And I thought, well, what's that? Oh, crikey, it's got to be the monster. I would have loved to have pulled in and watched it, but there was traffic close behind me. It was impossible to stop. I glanced maybe 3 or 4 times. And the final time it was gone.
So how did you know that this thing was alive?
It was a completely different size to the waves, and it wasn't moving like the waves do. I've never seen a wave as big as it. There was a lady who lived round the corner, and she had seen it 13 times, and she saw exactly the same as I did.
Right, that's interesting. So the sort of stereotypical picture that we all have of many loops or a body and then a neck, the actual people who live here and who've seen something, it's not like that. It's more like an upturned boat hull.
Yes, definitely. I think it's just something with a solid body.
Val is very clear that what she saw was the monster, and she also knows other people who've seen it. And what they saw was the same thing, which very definitely wasn't this multi-humped sea serpent that is the common depiction of the monster.
It's time to start applying my monster hunting skills to get to the bottom of this mystery. The word loch is the Scottish Gaelic name for a lake or sea inlet, and this one is so vast that it could almost swallow Manhattan. Although it's in my backyard, this will be the first time I've cast a line into its dark, unfathomable waters. Clearly, I'm not expecting to pull out a monster right away. My first step is to find out what fish it could be feeding on.
So this is really fishing at its simplest. This is the classic thing the little boy does when he first goes fishing. It's just a worm, or a nightcrawler as they're sometimes called, on a hook, cast it out. It's got movement, it's got smell. What could resist that?
I've no clue what might be lurking beneath us. But if something is tempted by my wriggling bait, then it will give me my first insight into the dark depths of the world's most mysterious body of water.
Here we go, here we go, here we go. I think so.
It looks like I've hooked the slimiest creature in the loch.
One of the stereotypical pictures of the Loch Ness Monster is something that's quite snake-like. It's a long animal with humps which poke out of the water. And here we go. This is a snake-like fish that lives in the water. This is a freshwater eel.
This slippery predator is a native fish once caught here for food, but now critically endangered.
The only thing is, this one's probably 3/4 pound, something like that. But at the very biggest, you're going to get one here, 4 or 5 pounds maybe. So what, 3-4 feet long?
Could the European eel be food for a much larger creature? One that somehow remains hidden. I carry on fishing, but the only creatures biting are more eels. So I'm beginning to wonder whether these extremely deep, dark waters are able to support much life at all. When I come across a scientist who does believe that a very large creature could be patrolling the depths of the loch.
Something primitive, reptilian, very monstrous looking.
I'm fishing Loch Ness on the trail of the world's most famous river monster. It seems the legend is far older than I thought. I've heard an ancient tale of a river monster attacking and killing a man here around 1500 years ago. So what kind of creature could it be? I'm hoping one man might have some clues. Scientist Adrian Shine has scrutinized these mysterious waters for more than 40 years. He was at the helm of an audacious survey in the 1980s which deployed 20 vessels to sweep the loch with sonar. They didn't find a monster. Adrian now believes that the surface action of the 700-foot deep loch can be deceiving, creating illusions in the waves.
You've only got to look at boat wakes on a calm day, and you will see lots and lots of multi-humped sea serpents. And this was recognized by the early investigators of the subject.
For more than a century, large boats have sailed the 22-mile-long loch, parallel to shore, sending out rolling wakes behind them. These can still be disturbing the surface half an hour after the boat has gone, and they are clearly visible from the road.
A bit more difficult to explain the plesiosaur, that marine reptile contemporary with the dinosaurs, with the long neck, the single hump. Water birds might account for that. There are a host of things that can account for it. Logs can be seen floating on Loch Ness. Logs can be seen apparently swimming against the wind. The stereotypes, and certainly the classic pictures, may have nothing to do with what is actually living, maybe, or be seen in Loch Ness. But it doesn't mean that monstrous things cannot be seen there.
But is it possible, though, that if you discount the boat wakes and things like floating logs, that there still could be something animate in here?
The fish that we have in here, salmon, the brown trout, the sea trout, the Arctic char, all those fish have come up from the sea, up the 7 miles of the River Ness.
Does that leave room for possibly a large creature coming up the river from the sea?
We've become aware over the last 20 years that seals enter the loch quite often. They follow the salmon up and they leave again because they wouldn't be sustained by the loch.
Male grey seals can grow to almost 8 feet and 700 pounds. But Adrian thinks that even larger aquatic monsters could be visiting from the open sea. Sturgeon. Oh! But sturgeon don't have any teeth, and the earlier story said that the monster had enough bite to kill a man. Is there another, more toothy and ultimately lethal candidate out there? The River Ness, which connects the loch to the sea, opens up an ocean of possibilities.
I think it's clear that no known freshwater creature could account for the sightings I've been hearing about. But there is this connection, the River Ness, between Loch Ness and the sea. And from past experience, I know that sometimes large saltwater creatures can make their way inland.
The most notorious is the deadly bull shark. But these top predators are warm water hunters. They need temperatures in the 60s and above. They couldn't survive here in the frigid 40s of the loch. It's well known that the Firth is home to whales and dolphins, but like the plesiosaur, these are air breathers and easily recognizable. I've one more lead to follow up, that ancient tale which originated in the Scottish Highlands, the story of a man killed by a water beast in the River Ness. This might be my last chance to find a clue to the identity of the monster here. In the 6th century, St. Columba came to this part of Scotland to convert the pagan inhabitants known as Picts to Christianity. At the same time, he banished a beast from the River Ness. I've arranged to meet archaeologist Kate McCulloch, who's an expert on the history and legends of the area.
Columba comes upon a scene where a man has been brought out of the water. He's completely brutalized by some sort of water beast, a river monster. The people of the area around the River Ness are terrified.
But Columba isn't afraid. He sends one of his followers out into the river, and the monster rises from the depths again.
Columba demonstrates the power of his god by banishing this beast, telling it to go from the river. And presumably sending it down the river towards the loch.
Is there any description of the creature in here?
There's nothing to suggest anything about the actual physicality of the monster, just a disturbance of the water.
The Picts didn't leave any written records of their own, but Kate has unearthed stone carvings, which might give me an insight into the identity of this savage creature.
This is known as the Pictish beast and is generally recognised to be some sort of river or loch monster. It's a folklore that is not exclusive to the north of Scotland. There's certainly a connection to Norse Scandinavian sources with this particular sea or river or loch monster.
Kate's offered clues that send my investigation in a new direction, much further back in history and possibly over the cold northern seas, with the revelation that these centuries-old Scottish monster myths may have Viking connections. Viking longships sailed thousands of miles over the northern Atlantic. Raiding parties from Scandinavia stormed and colonized Scotland, and they established a remote outpost on Iceland. These incredibly tough warriors were convinced that these cold seas were home to monsters. The Vikings wrote down their legends around 800 years ago, up here in Iceland, where some ancient texts have survived to this day. To pursue this hunch that the Vikings may hold the key to the legend of Loch Ness, I now have to head to the edge of the Arctic Circle. Iceland is a land of fire and ice. It's studded with volcanic mountains, but more than 1/10 of the land is permanently buried under glaciers. Since Viking times, people on this far-flung island have told countless stories of dangerous water monsters. My travels have shown me that the origins of so many myths lie in real flesh and blood creatures, and I won't give up until I get a real flesh and blood creature in my hands. I'm looking for a sea monster that can make its way inland. So I'm going to start where the land meets the sea. And the best way for me to find out what lives in these near Arctic waters is to get a line in.
Something down there.
Loch Ness is famous for its monster, but what other disturbing secret lurks on the bottom of the loch? Find out right after this. Loch Ness is famous for its monster, but what other disturbing secret lurks on the bottom of the loch? There's a layer of radioactive sediment from the fallout of the Chernobyl disaster. I'm on the hunt for a creature that could have inspired the legend of Loch Ness. An ancient attack story has launched me from Scotland to an island on the edge of the Arctic Circle. Iceland. Once the remote stronghold of the Vikings, this land is still riddled with monster stories and sightings. This is an island that's always relied on fishing, so I'm back in my element once again, trying to hook a marine predator that's capable of swimming inland.
Something down there.
So there we go, famous cod. Classic 3 dorsal fins and that the beard, the barbel in the middle of the chin. It shows there's fish down here anyway.
So far, I'm not catching anything monstrous looking that could inspire terror in the Vikings. I need to know if anything else was living in these waters in the Vikings' time that could have inspired a legend.
I've heard of a priest and historian who's made it his mission to uncover and catalogue all of Iceland's water monsters. Sigurdur Einarsson shows me a national treasure, a 400-year-old map, literally covered in water beasts. Are there stories about some of these creatures?
Yes, there are stories about them. This is most certainly the Lingback. It was supposed to be the largest of all whales. Lingback means trees on its back, like on an island. It was supposed to be very big. Very big.
Are there any drawings or records of large fish in Icelandic waters?
We have a story from the 10th century in the sagas about a boy who was asked to carry a big fish from a boat. If he could do it, then he was to keep it. He succeeded in doing this. Some say this is one of the shark species he was carrying.
So even though we're talking cold northern water here, you've got sharks swimming off Iceland?
Yes, we have.
I'd never considered that a shark could be a contender for a Viking terror. It's clearly no species I've caught before. I don't know of any predatory giants coming this far north. So what's this huge shark called?
Hákarl. It also means the one, and has been eaten through the ages in Iceland. It's a delicacy, actually.
So they eat it to this day?
Yeah, it's very nice.
This is an extraordinary piece of information. Could a cold water predatory shark have a place in the legend of Loch Ness? If it has the iconic dorsal fin of most sharks, surely that would give it away. I need to find out more. Sigurdur has told me that there's a remote farm in a desert of hardened lava where they still prepare these giant sharks to eat. The hanging chunks of flesh don't give away any clues as to what the whole animal might look like. Guðjón Hildebrandson's family has prepared hákarl meat at their isolated farm since his grandfather's day.
Hello. When the meat is fresh, it's toxic. So that's why we do this fermentation process.
Learning that its flesh is laced with poison only adds to the sinister aura surrounding this mysterious shark. Apparently, fermentation breaks down the toxin, but releases a pungent smell of ammonia. The flesh I'm about to taste smells of urine. It's got a really strong aftertaste. It really kicks in. It really kicks in the back of the throat after you've taken the first bit. It's not like anything I've tasted before.
Yeah, it's unique.
But I can imagine, though, you know, in the old days, I mean, you've got a big fish, you can't eat it all in one go. It's wasteful just to throw it away. You've got to do something with it. So this is a traditional method. How big is the whole animal?
They're from maybe 10 till 20 feet, and from then they are maybe 1,000 till 2,500 pounds.
Wow.
So they are quite big.
You don't happen to have a whole one here by any chance, do you, that I can have a look at?
But give me a second.
Right. Oh, right, okay.
This is his mouth. This is a jaw.
These jaws are peculiar. This shark has two quite distinct types of teeth. So these ones will grip the food, whatever it is, and then they shake the head, is it?
Yeah.
So these ones will then cut it. Just almost cut myself there. Yeah, right. These jaws belong to a potent predator. Seal, whale, and even polar bear meat and body parts have turned up in its stomach. Things have taken a very dramatic and strange turn. Who would have thought that in these waters there is a massive shark that grows to well in excess of 1,000 pounds? The only predatory sharks I know of that grow that big can't survive in these near-Arctic seas. And just from those teeth alone, I can tell that it's not like any shark I've encountered before, but these people here have been catching it and eating it for centuries. These sharks are no longer fished for deliberately. They turn up as bycatch on commercial boats. Now, I only have one course of action: to get onto a boat and hope it will bring in one of these giants. But there's a problem. It turns out a lot of these boats have already caught their quota, so they're not actually putting out to sea again. And those that are,
are staying out for weeks, if not months at a time, so I can't do that. It really looks as if I've run into something of a dead end.
I've come so far, I won't give up now. Eventually, I get the name of a fisherman who can catch them. But not here in Iceland. He's 1,000 miles away, in Norway. This next stage of my mission is going to test me to the limit as I hunt for a creature that's truly the stuff of legend. My mission that started in Scotland took a surprising turn to Iceland, hunting for the creature at the heart of the legend of Loch Ness. Now, I'm retracing the voyages of the Vikings back to their original homeland in Norway, to the former capital of their seafaring kingdom, Trondheim. I've been given the name of a professional fisherman who works in the 80-mile-long fjord that connects Trondheim to the sea. I'm told he's one of the few who can help me catch this mysterious giant shark on rod and line. I hear that Frederick Cullen even has photographs of this strange beast.
They don't have this huge dorsal fin, very little dorsal fin, and they're grey or almost black.
Although I've never seen one in the flesh, I recognize this animal. In Iceland, it's called the hákarl, but I know it as the Greenland shark, a creature all but unknown to modern science, and first filmed in the wild only 10 years ago. Greenland sharks live further north than any other shark, and they're the only shark to hunt under Arctic ice. Their range exactly coincides with the Vikings' kingdom, from Greenland to Iceland to Norway, and most significantly, Scotland. We know that the Vikings ate its flesh, so this monstrous creature is one they must have been very familiar with. But here, the sharks live at the bottom of a 2,000-foot deep fjord. This will be the first time I've ever tried to fish at such staggering depths, and I don't have much time to learn a whole new methodology. It's the end of autumn. As soon as winter closes in, shark fishing in this fjord will be impossible.
We try to hit the borderline between the rock and the clay. It seems like they're cruising around along these edges here, searching for food.
The logistics of working at these depths involve a great deal of precision, effort and care. Get caught in this rope, and you'll be on a one-way trip to the bottom of the fjord.
We're going to be using somewhere between 800 and 1,000 meters of anchor line here.
Right, so that's a good half a mile of
yeah.
anchor line.
I'll be using the longest lines I've ever fished with, so thick nylon monofilament is out. It would create too much drag in the current, and the reel would have to be enormous. Instead, I'm using woven braid. It's very fine and very strong, but it does have a fatal flaw.
We use these long mono traces for protection of the braid.
Yeah.
And the skin is like very rough sandpaper.
So if the skin touches that, then it just goes
immediately.
My lines are descending into a vast hidden landscape, like a submerged Grand Canyon. But Frederick's sonar can't reveal any sharks prowling down there. They're too deep, and their bodies are too dense to be distinguished from the bottom of the abyss in which they're hunting.
So we've got all the lines out now. It's just a question of waiting.
If a shark does take the bait, the only clue will be a movement of the rod top that doesn't fit with the movement of the boat. But there's no predicting when one might strike. After 2 hours, we bring all the lines up to check the baits. Between the 4 rods, that's almost 1.5 miles of line, carrying 20 pounds of metal weights, reeled in by hand. My whole arm is burning.
Right, that's why we have to check the baits periodically because they just get chewed by smaller fish. There's a possibility a shark could take that, but I mean, that's not a very effective, appetizing bait. So that's why I spent 25 minutes bringing them up to have a look.
All the hooks have to be rebaited and the lines reset 2,000 feet below. With every line finely tuned, the wait begins again.
That's interesting. So, oh, wait a minute. See that?
Is there movement?
Yeah, that's sort of pulling.
Yeah. Put on the harness.
Harness, see, hold on.
Yeah.
The harness should stop the rod being wrenched from my hands by a heavyweight giant.
There's definitely something there.
Yeah, there is.
And it feels like it weighs a ton. On a freezing fjord in Norway, I'm trying to haul up a giant from 2,000 feet below.
Come on. Yeah.
Could this creature have inspired the legends of Loch Ness?
Start reeling the other one.
The other lines have to come up before I can bring in the beast on the end of mine. If they don't, the fish could become tangled and trapped beneath the boat.
Think it might. That's a very big skate, isn't it?
That is a Norwegian skate.
It's a Norwegian skate.
This bizarre creature of the fjord floor was first described here in Trondheim. It's an extremely rare sight at the surface. The fantastical imagination of the Nordic mapmakers now seems quite tame compared with the reality of what's down there.
It's a very impressive looking animal, very strange looking animal, but very rare as well. Apparently Frederick's saying only 4 of these caught on rod and line before. So we've got to remember, we've got to take a tissue sample. These things don't come to the light very often at all.
Frederick works with a scientist at Tromsø University who collects all the data from his catches of sharks and skates.
It's the right colour for the fish that I want. The skin underneath certainly has got that rough feel, but it's completely the wrong shape. Skates are flattened sharks, and this is a very strange looking skate, but it's still not the fish I'm looking for.
We have to tag it and measure it as quickly as possible.
125 across.
125 across.
4 foot across by nearly 6 foot nose to tail. Sharks and skates are among the few fish that can survive being brought up from such depths. They haven't evolved the gas-filled swim bladders of other fish that can rupture on the way up.
And that thing is a bit like an alien, a real weird-looking thing, living in a weird environment.
Some people spend their lives waiting for such a chance encounter with a monster, both here and at Loch Ness.
The big Greenland shark still eludes me. That thing is actually rarer. But where's the shark?
Hours melt into days, and I begin to lose myself in the eerie whistling of the lines. After fishing 400 rod hours and reeling in 50 miles of line, is my luck about to change?
Was it a good nod or? Oh yeah. You feel some real weight now?
Yes.
Yes.
That is not the lead. That's the fish.
It's my last chance, but is it the monster I've come so far to find? Something monstrous has seized my bait.
That's the fish.
At the bottom of a freezing 2,000-foot deep Norwegian fjord.
It's very important the other lines come in to make sure that we don't get tangled. I think it's getting near the boat. It's probably aware of the boat now. Leader's in sight. Okay.
There's it.
The Greenland shark. It's just too big to bring on board. We'd only injure it trying. We'll have to tie it alongside.
It's a monstrous thing to find this far inland and to bring up from such a depth as well, but we're just trying to get the tail rope on it now. By the standards of what normally lives inland, this is huge, this is monstrous. Willem's reckoning possibly 400 pounds.
Despite their enormous size, they're a mystery to science. We know virtually nothing about how they live, breed or hunt.
Small dorsal fin, that's not your normal erect, sharp dorsal fin. If this was actually at the surface, you wouldn't see that characteristic triangle cutting the surface. It'd be just more of a smooth hump.
But if I want to get a closer look, and if the fish can't come to me in the boat, I have to go to the fish. I've no choice but to get into the freezing water with the world's largest predatory shark after the great white.
This water, even through the dry suit and about 5 layers of undergarments, is cold. It's cold, and this thing lives in it all the time. I'm not up here, nearly half a mile down. Dark brown in colour. If this came up and did break the surface, you wouldn't actually think it was a shark. You wouldn't know what it was. It has got this sort of upturned boat hull appearance. What a beast this is.
It's believed they'll eat almost anything they come across down in the abyssal depths. No one yet knows what potential threat they pose to humans.
I've lost the front of the shark. I'm a bit too close to the business end. I'm going to come back a little bit. I think it's probably getting close to the time when we should actually set the hook out and let it go back to the depths. Yeah. OK. Give it a saw there.
As I clamber out of the freezing fjord, Frederick tags the shark in case it ever surfaces again.
Good, hooked out. Tail rope to go. Oh, it's gone already, and it just seems very unreal now that it was here. A lot of people even living around here, no idea that creatures like that are almost right under their noses.
But could this mysterious giant be the creature behind the legend of Loch Ness? I've considered the contenders, from whales and dolphins, to seals and sturgeon, and even plesiosaurs. But one by one, I've had to dismiss them all. But in Iceland, the home of the Vikings monster myths, I came across a real contender.
Hákarl. It also means the one.
That ultimately led me to the one, the Greenland shark in this abyssal fjord in Norway.
But what I'm realizing now is just how special that encounter was. To see that creature rise from the depths on the end of my line. I've seen this thing myself. I know it exists.
And I believe it could have inspired some of the monster stories that the Vikings passed between generations and across the lands they conquered. From experience, I've learned that many legends hold a grain of truth. And I'm now wondering whether not just the myth, but the animal itself ever surfaced in Loch Ness.
My journey has led me to a remarkable, immense predator that is so secretive that we know almost nothing about it. But what we do know is that it lives in exactly the right part of the world, where it hunts in almost unimaginably deep, dark and cold water. But on rare occasions, it's also known to rise up near the surface. And if you were one of the very few people to witness this creature in the flesh, you'd have no doubt that you'd seen a monster.
Perhaps even the ultimate river monster, the legend of legends.
But who would believe you?